Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's a bright, beautiful day out there. I'm excited to talk about how to beat out the incumbent, right? If you're an incumbent, you might not like this unless you're trying to beat out another incumbent, and then it'll all work out good. In today's training, we're going to be talking about how to beat the incumbent when you're looking at an opportunity in your sales pipeline and you want to beat an incumbent in the federal market. This is what we're going to talk about. And the reason we want to talk about this is because so many contracts out there are recompetes. In fact, if I was looking at my pipeline, most of my pipeline is recompetes because new opportunities, although they're attractive, they tend to be the most likely to keep having the date pushed to the right by months or even years. But recompetes, the likelihood of them pushing to the right is pretty slim because they had 5 years to think about recompeting it. Generally, we're talking about a 5-year contract here. And so one of the challenges that we have, and you might have this, right, is that you feel like when you're going after a recompete or a contract that already has an incumbent, that the incumbent has a leg up, that they're definitely going to win. Does the incumbent have some potential advantages? For sure. Do they have a position where they're definitely going to win? No, that's just a myth that's out there. Clearly, there's advantages if they take advantage of it, but I'm going to show you how incumbents sometimes are just lazy and they end up losing because of their complacency. Maybe lazy is too strong of a word, but they're complacent, right? And we'll talk about that. But when you think about all these recompetes that are out there and you're worried about whether you can win against an incumbent, I want you to know that you can win against an incumbent. You just have to have a process, a plan, right? When you think about capture plan, that whole idea is how are we going to capture this work? And when you have a process that you follow, and I'll give you some tips in today's training, when you have a process that you follow, you're going to be able to beat out the incumbent on opportunities you want to go after, or at least you're going to level the playing field so that it's not like they have a leg up. What I really want you to think about, though, is if you put this plan in place to address your concerns about, well, the incumbent's always going to win, you know what, I'm going to counter that by putting a plan and a process in place in my company to go after recompetes and beat the incumbent. If you think about that, imagine now being able to look at FPDS or SAM and go, you know what? I want that opportunity. It's coming up for recompete in a year or 2 years or even 3 years. I want that opportunity. It's going into our pipeline. We're going to be proactive about our business development and capture, proactively choosing opportunities we want to go after and then doing what we can to put them, position them for us. That's business development and capture, right? So today I really want to focus on emphasizing and reinforcing in your mind and heart that you can beat incumbents. It's totally possible to beat out the incumbent contractor, and you're going to see this in a minute. I want to point out mistakes, some mistakes you make that just won't position you for beating out the incumbent, right? So you need to be aware of that. And then I want to point out a whole bunch of mistakes that incumbents make that enable you to be able to have a chance to go up against them. And if you're an incumbent, you should use that as a checklist to go, let's make sure we don't do that, right? And then I'm going to wrap up with tips for beating the incumbent. What I have in today's training is absolutely a day's worth of training. I could probably do 2 days of training on just this topic and just the material I'm sharing. So I'm shoving it into 30 minutes. Keep up with me. I'm not sharing slides, so don't ask me that, but feel free to take a screenshot. I don't share slides, by the way, because it's just extra work, right? I got to come back. I got my day job to get to. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. If you're looking at my screen, you can see that I laid out a 7-step process for success in the federal market. This is not a secret that I'm sharing with you. It's just the basic process that I simplified into a 7-step process, right? Research, target, and outreach allows you to build relationships that enable you to then find opportunities, write great proposals so that you hit your sales goals. It's a process, A to Z, repeatable, predictable results. Do me a favor, before we go too far, help buyers, help me, help others. Remember who you are. Put your company name into the chat. Do it every single time you come to my training. And then also put in your core competency. What do you sell? 2 or 3 words is sufficient. So it begins to help us all just understand, oh, John does this, Jane does this. And then the last thing is, this is your community. Engage in the community. Say hi to people, right? There's a lot of you who come back to multiple trainings. So say hi, give a thumbs up on, somebody posts a little comment in there, give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, just smash the like button if that's something that you like to do. I don't know how to do it, but go ahead and do that. But the idea is engage with the community. And then for the people who make sense, take them offline and try to have a connection and an introduction meeting. Last thing on just this welcome section here is I just want to point out today's Monday the 6th. The training we're doing is on the incumbency, but as you go forward into the rest of the week, we've got why federal agencies don't take your calls or why you're not getting a second meeting. Thursday, I'm talking about how you can have predictable success. This is really important. When I say, oh, you should have repeatable, predictable results, well, what results should be predictable? And then how, Neil, do I get those? That's what I'm going to try to cover down on Thursday. And then for those of you who are new, because we often get a mixed crowd, if you haven't been making money, right, or if you're looking to make another 100,000, but really Friday is about, if you're not making any money and you're coming to my training, come to Friday. I'm going to lay down a really detailed approach of how do you go make your first 100,000 in government contracting. I would love to have you as a customer when you're making $1 million or more, right? When you're making less than $1 million, I need to sit there and help you get to the stage where you can be my customer. So let me teach you for free how to make that first 100,000. Come on Friday. Okay. Again, if you haven't been here to my training, I move at a fire hose pace. You can just watch on replays. Replays are available immediately. But when you think about beating the incumbent, the first thing you have to put in your mind is we absolutely can beat the incumbent. It is no different going after an opportunity that has an incumbent than going after an opportunity that's a new opportunity. The chances of somebody knowing about that opportunity other than you is high, right? And so whether it's an incumbent doing the work or somebody who's in there identifying a new opportunity, you still got competition, right? But beating out incumbents, this happens a lot. SeaPort or NavC just did this industry day recently. And if you're following me on LinkedIn, you know that I'm starting to share every day this week slides and information from NavC. But in particular, they had SeaPort NxG program folks in there talking about last year's use of and success of the contract vehicle. SeaPort NxG is one of the major contract vehicles used by the Navy. Anyways, the point is in there, they talked about how the incumbents lost more than 50% of the awards. And they didn't say it that way. They said, those of us who are not incumbents won more than 50%. But you get my point, right? More than 50% of the incumbents on SeaPort NxG opportunities didn't win. That means people can beat out the incumbents for sure. I have a customer who and I try to keep it vague, but they're in the DoD space. They have they're doing 100 million plus contracts value, right? And they have a customer that loves them and knows them, and they've been there for a long time. And they lost out on an opportunity. They're an incumbent, and they lost out on an opportunity. And the reason is because they made this assumption that the customer knew that they did this work because you're paying us to do this work, right? And the problem is the contracting officer said, yeah, but you didn't write it in the RFP or the proposal, right? You have to tell us in the proposal that you do stuff. We can't go, oh, I know that company. I know they're good at something, because that's not fair. The government evaluates us based on our proposals, not on what they know about us, right? We can influence a little bit, but really they're fair about it. This is what I love about the federal market. All things being equal, it's a fair playing ground for us. And so these guys lost it because they were making the assumption that their customer already knew about it. I have this twice where that was an example of where somebody lost it, but I've beaten out incumbents before, right? One of them was at the White House where the core and the head of IT, and I was doing IT stuff, the head of IT loved the incumbent, but we were able to come in and beat them out. And primarily the reason I'm able to beat out incumbents is we just had a lot of experience around what they were trying to do. We didn't undercut cost, never. We never go lowball on cost. We just came in with heavy ammunition on, hey, we know what we're doing and we're bringing it to the table. Veterans Affairs is an even bigger example for me. I went in and competed against an incumbent who had the director of the department's wife worked for the incumbent, right? And he recused himself, to be fair, which is the best thing for me, right? Because it's fair. He stayed out of it, but the incumbent knew it. She had intimate knowledge of the agency and the work as well. So they had good, solid understanding, right? Solid incumbent. But we were able to come in this particular case, it was at the headquarters for the Department of Veterans Affairs, but the experience we brought was from the hospital level. And the work that they were really trying to envision going forward was, how do we do stuff at the national level that the hospitals will care about? Well, because of our past performances and our way of understanding each hospital, we are able to say, this is what they care about, and this is how we can help execute your vision down at their level and have huge adoption, et cetera. And my point is, I beat out 2 big incumbents. That Veterans Affairs one was huge, right? And so it's important for you to keep in mind that, yes, you can absolutely beat out incumbents. I just want to talk about some mistakes for a minute before I move forward into tips on how you can really beat out the incumbent. The first thing that I want you to do is face the reality about why you're not going to succeed. I say this softly, but I really want to make sure you're not getting confused, right? You're not going to beat an incumbent if you're not focused, if you don't have a niche. The way I beat out the 2 incumbents that I beat out is we had a solid focused niche. We did SharePoint services, and SharePoint was solid within the government. So we were experts in that particular space. And the second thing is, you're not going to beat out an incumbent if you don't have any relevant past performance. If you're just starting in government contracting, or you've got some of these little past performances, don't expect to go up against somebody who's got a solid presence within a customer doing great work, et cetera, in there. It's not about that. To me, it's more about, if you're, let's say, a $5 or $10 million company, you can start beating out even larges on opportunities that are in that $10 to $20 million space for sure, because you can do that work. And if you can bring relevant, which means relevant to the requirements and relevant to the agency, or at least that they see similar, then you're going to be able to beat out the incumbent. But if you don't have those, come on, you're not going to be able to push in there. If you write half-baked proposals, if you don't sit there and look at your proposal and go, how do we write a proposal that is such a winning proposal? We've covered down on every particular area, thinking about the wins, not just about compliance, not just about pricing, but how do we sit there and write a proposal in a way it's fully baked, when you write it in a way that it's compelling and persuasive to the buyer, right? They look and they go, that's a company that gets us, right? And the last tip for facing reality about why you won't succeed, or you might not succeed, is if you don't do capture. If all you do is hear about an opportunity and then write a proposal, there's a really good chance you're not going to beat out the incumbent, because you're not really going to bring anything new to that customer. You're not going to wow them. You're not going to surprise them, et cetera. And I'll talk more about this in a second. But if you don't do capture, you're probably not going to beat out the incumbent, right? And I would just like to say you're not going to beat out the incumbent, but there's these one-off chances, right? And capture is about getting in there and shaping the requirements and the acquisition approach through discussion, right? And meeting with the customer. If you're not doing that, you're probably not going to win. So that was potential reasons on why you might not beat out the incumbent. If you've got those covered down on, then my next slide after this one, you'll be able to see tips for how you just drive it home and beat the incumbent. But let's pause for a second to talk about why incumbents lose on their own, even independent of you doing a good job. Sometimes incumbents just screw it up themselves. And I say again that softly, they make mistakes, right? I mentioned this earlier. Many times I find incumbents are complacent, right? I put lazy, but really they're complacent. We're doing a great job. The customer says they love us. I go out and have beers once in a while. Well, that doesn't matter. That's not how sales is done in the government, right? First off, that's partly good old boy from the legacy way. But the contracting officers and the other people making decisions, they make it following a set of rules that are in there. And sometimes incumbents get too lazy or complacent around their relationship and the fact that we show up every day and we have coffee. That's not good enough. You need to do capture on opportunities, in particular ones that you have already. The next thing is number 2, right? They have no relationship with the contracting officer. I find this a lot, where there's an incumbent and they come to work and they go home. They come to work and they go home, but they're not developing any kind of real relationship with the program leadership, right? They might report to this one person, but the program staff or the contract staff and the program manager for your company or the incumbent's company, they're not taught how to really build relationships throughout the year and throughout the life of the contract with the program office, how to build that relationship beyond coffee and a beer, but actually around business. They don't know the contracting officer at all, right? Maybe they bring the contracting officer in if there's a problem. Instead of keeping them informed and having a 15-minute meeting once a month and always being on their radar, that's something they should be doing. Number 3, right? They don't do capture. I already mentioned this before. If you don't do capture, if they don't do capture, there's chances of you winning it or decrease significantly. Number 4, they write what they know, but not what's in the RFP. And this is really important, right? I don't want to confuse this because sometimes you want to add value through capture. Capture is you're having conversations and you're learning about stuff that's not written down. What I mean is sometimes, instead, what I mean about 4 is that sometimes it'll say something in the RFP, and an incumbent will look at this and go, well, that's not even actually right. Because I'm talking with Johnny, who's the boss, and Johnny is saying that we really want to go to Google, even though it says in the proposal or RFP that we want to go Microsoft, as an example, right? And so the incumbent goes, we know better than the RFP. Like, good luck with that. You're completely writing away from what's in here. And when it gets to evaluation, they're evaluating what's in the RFP. They're not evaluating the conversation you had with Johnny, right? So that not adhering to what's in the RFP is the problem. Yes, you want to do capture and have conversations with Johnny and learn about how you can add value, add a little bit more value to the RFP, but never miss out or assume that what's in the SAO or PWS, et cetera, is wrong. Number 5 here, they assume the customer knows them during evaluation. And this was that mistake I mentioned earlier, right? Oh, they already know that we do this type of work because we do it all the time. We don't really have to write a lot. They love us. No, you have to write down why they love you, right? Even if the very evaluators are people who are at your kid's birthday party, it doesn't matter. The way they evaluate a proposal is very professional. They look at it and they say, here's your criteria. Is it in the proposal? If it's not, then you're making assumptions that are going to sit there and cut your legs out from underneath you. Or this is what incumbents do. And what I'm really trying to reinforce with these mistakes is that the incumbents make mistakes all the time that you can take advantage of to beat them out, right? Number 6, I talked about the customer loves them, right? This is a really different one. So I talked about going to a birthday party or having a beer, but something else that's a really important one, and I've seen this happen, is the incumbent will assume they love us, right? We've been working with them for years. Well, I've been in DoD organizations where the command staff will come in, they're trying to shake it up. They're like, oh, this is all the status quo. I need something new, right? And there's no more love. First off, they don't have any institutional relationship with you or long-term relationship with you. And second, they're like, I'm kind of looking for something different, right? And so as an incumbent, you need to pretend like you're different when you're writing a proposal. Go, oh, that incumbent, right? So this is a weird way of looking at it. But if you're an incumbent, you need to compete against yourself. You need to write a proposal that's even better than yourself, kind of thing, right? Don't be so complacent to go, they love me, I'm going to write this. But the other thing is pay attention to the fact that people change. Maybe the evaluators, somebody gets sick or somebody goes off on maternity leave and they have to bring in people who don't have this history of you. And they look at the RFP and they look at the proposal and they make a decision. They don't know anything about you. Number 7, and I'm going back and forth when I keep saying you, but I'm really trying to say this is why incumbents make mistakes that are opportunities for you. Number 7, this is a huge one where you let certifications lapse. For example, you must be in SAM and actively registered. So if you have, and I'm not trying to be a FAR expert here or anything else, but if you, at the time of award, they look into SAM and you're expired, then you can't get the award, right? And it depends on whether it's like at the time of proposal, submitting RFP or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you let your SAM profile or some other certifications that are important expire and they look at that point, you don't get a second chance. You're out, right? And you can look at GAO protests or whatever that will lay that out. There's lawyers who will talk more about that. But from the big thing, these mistakes happen. And then number 8, it's the silliest mistake in the world, but incumbents will be a day late or a minute late. If you're late, you're late. If you're late, you're not compliant. You want to be there if for no other reason than they might be late. Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to try to go through 12 different ideas. So let's see how far I can go. I'm going to track on them, but I want to give you suggestions. At the end, I'll pause so you can take a screenshot of all 12 of these. So don't worry about writing them down or anything. I'll pause long enough for you to do this. But as I go forward, these are just different ideas and things for you to think about on how to beat the incumbent for the award. So the first thing is make sure you're starting early enough, right? Give yourself time to go after this, to learn the agency and learn about the opportunity. The second thing, I'm saying a FOIA request, but you might be able to just go to SAM and get this, but go get the previous RFP to see what the eval criteria was on a recompete, right? And then aim for knocking our socks off. What I mean by this is in the eval criteria, and again, I'm not trying to use formal words, I'm trying to use easy words. In an evaluation, you can either be satisfactory or you can be exceptional or above satisfactory, right? Or you can knock our socks off, right? You can either be satisfactory, exceed expectations, or knock our socks off. I want you to aim for knocking our socks off every single time when you're thinking about the requirements or anything you're writing, or when you're looking at the eval and they evaluate past performance or technical competence or whatever, these different ways. Always aim for knocking our socks off. Number 3 here, figure out how to disqualify the incumbent. To me, this is a fundamental part of capture when you're trying to push out all of your competition. In this case, you might want to try to do this to push out the incumbent as well. So examples I put here is the NAICS code. Say, for example, the incumbent has this contract for a while and they're getting bigger and bigger. Well, they got a little bit too big for a particular NAICS, and now they're not small anymore in this NAICS, but they're moving up. If you can find the rationale, the data and the evidence to convince the contracting officer that this really should be on this NAICS code, if you can do that, boom, you knock it down, they're pushed out of the running, right? Everything is about going, how can I push them out of the running? You may or may not succeed, but certifications, ISO certifications or CMMI, maybe it was CMMI 2, but you should say, hey, there should be CMMI 3. Maybe it's CMMC. Maybe you should be saying, hey, if it's in DoD in particular, there should be people who have CMMC 3 whenever that comes out. But total small business set aside is what TSBS-A means. Or woman-owned set aside, right? Push this to set aside, right? Don't forget the incumbent could be a large business and they want a $20 million or even a $50, $100 million contract. Those contracts should be in small business. If it's a $100 million contract, $20 million over 5 years, smalls can do that. There are many smalls who can do that. It shouldn't have to go to the Raytheon or Booz Allen or somebody, right? But if you get in early enough and you start trying to push them out, one of the ways to do that is to get a bunch of other smalls to get in and express interest, giving the contracting officer this idea that I should be pushing this down to small business, because small businesses can do that. One tip I put at the end of this line is that sometimes the incumbents don't even track any of this stuff. They're not tracking their own NAICS codes or certs. They're not really paying attention to it. They might be looking at a higher solutioning level, but they're not paying attention to all the acquisition ways of competing with each other. This is a quick tip about recruiting the incumbent staff, right? There's a lot of different ways out there, but this isn't one I've heard people talk about. But you might consider hosting a webinar for other people's employees. I used to do this all the time in my last company. I would host webinars on training those employees on whatever might be really valuable for them advancing their career, right? And then I would begin to slowly get them into my world. We call that a top of the funnel. In this particular case, it's more of a information gathering funnel. If I can get the employees to get on my radar, then I have a chance to follow up. Hey, Jane, do you mind if I talk to you? How's that contract going? Are you interested in something else? That's capture, right? That's having those conversations. Build strategic relationships, right? It's vital if you're going to try to beat the incumbent out that you get in and you talk to the government, the program office, small business shop, the acquisition shop. Begin to meet people related to this opportunity in one way or another. Even if they're 1 or 2 degrees separate, that's fine, because there's people who are around there. Get to know the people who were supported by the work that you do. And then don't forget about industry. If you need teaming partners later on, you want to make sure that you're building teaming partners and strong teams with folks who have experience in the agency you're trying to go after. I say here, build a very strong team that wows. And what I mean by this is that you want to make sure that you're saying why this team is so great. It might have a large in it if you think that's valuable, or you might have somebody who's got a really unique expertise around artificial intelligence. Whatever it is, figure out what it's going to take to wow, right? To knock their socks off, and then build a team around that. Don't try to keep 100% of something. Share. Remember the tip at the beginning, right? Your candle doesn't lose any light if you light others, if you team with others. Number 7, right? Tie requirements that are in the PWS or this RFP to higher level priorities. When you do this, especially when you do this in the proposal and you're talking, you're telling them and helping them understand that your proposal and your team sees how this requirement fits into the bigger picture, right? If you think about DoD, they're very cautious about Russia and China and Iran and all this stuff. How does your little thing down here help, right? Not everything is going to tie up to China or something, but understanding where it fits into the bigger picture. Number 8, have better past performances than the incumbent. So the incumbent can be in there somewhere, but remember when I said I had a VA experience where I beat out the incumbent, they had experience in the very shop with the very application that we were going to be developing. But what we brought was more than just the technology. We brought the past performance experience within the customer base that the VA was going to be trying to reach with their next requirement, right? With the recompete. And so you want to do that same thing, have some varied experience. If you do something, how have you varied that across other customers? So you're doing it in their agency or department, but you're also doing it across, let's say, DHS, Army, and somebody else. You're able to come in and say, we've got a broad breadth of experience that allows us to bring a lot of lessons learned. Number 9, right? This one is really important that I like to do this, is to say, and you have to figure out how to do this. It's a whole separate training, but the incumbent can solve problems. I can find 10,000 companies to solve your problem. We don't solve the problems so much as prevent them. We can identify and prevent problems. If you highlight that in there, now the incumbent is talking about how they'll protect the system when something goes bad. We're saying we'll identify what could go bad and stop it from ever happening. Number 10, figure out, do they want to pay less or do more, right? You don't have to lower your price if what they really want is to be able to do more within the budget they have. So if they got $1 million, don't try to get it to an $800,000 price point. Give them more for the $1 million. Number 11, right? Emphasize the relationships you have with OEMs. An example is my last company, I teamed with, I was a Microsoft shop through and through, but AvePoint was this third-party vendor. And what I was able to tell the customers, I knew the president, I knew all the product people, I could influence when features were put into their next build. That was really important because they had things that they wanted. I had access to change the direction of the tool to get builds out sooner. The government can't really do that. They have to wait. And the last thing is make your win theme, we exceed all expectations. An example that I put down here is that if you're supposed to deliver weekly reports, say, hey, we don't just deliver weekly reports. We turn those into real-time daily reports that are on demand for you. We can talk once a week, but you can have access to the data on real time. We have it on this dashboard for you. Figure out, how do you take what they want, even the most basic things, and knock their socks off. Okay, so there's the picture. You can take a screenshot of that. I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can come back for the replay if you didn't get it on that thing. But here's what I want you to remember, because I want to make sure I end on time, right? Yes, the incumbents can absolutely be beaten. Remember, in the Navy with SeaPort NxG, more than 50% of the incumbents lost out on a recompete. When you want to sit there and go after an incumbent, you can do this if you follow a plan, a process that says this is what we're going to do in order to beat that incumbent. We're not just going to write a compliant proposal, but we're going to beat this incumbent in this process, or in this way. Here's a task for you that I want you to do is think about where you're trying to get in. You must have in your pipeline opportunities that are recompete. Get relationships started, right? This is the whole 7-step process that I teach and we help companies with, right? But you can do this on your own, is get into companies and start building those strategic relationships where you're having multiple meetings with particular people within an agency, so it allows you to have the information and the relationships ready when you're going after those recompetes. If you're interested in working with us at any point, feel free to go to govconchamber.com. You can learn more about how me and my team, we can help you accelerate your success in the federal market. And for all of us, as you head into the day, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.